What most people don't know about Hospice of Dayton is that it was one of the first hospices formed in the United States. And that was way back in 1978.
A registered nurse and mother of 5 cares for her own mother, who has only a few months to live. Her name is Betty Schmall. The place is Dayton, Ohio. And what she does in the next few months and years that follow will change the way terminally ill people are cared for in this community and the country. Hello, I'm Jeff Cutlip, a video storyteller. I'm also a native Daytonian, born right here at Miami Valley Hospital and educated through the Kettering school system. You know, growing up here, I heard many stories of the great figures from Dayton's history. Inventors like the Wright brothers and Charles F. Kettering, poet Paul Laurence Dunbar, and the industrial legend and leader John Patterson. But in all this time, I had never heard about Betty Schmall, the nurse and mother I just described, who took the experience of caring for her mother and extended it to a new level of care for the terminally ill. Now, many would say that her contributions are as important to our quality of life as any of our other famous Daytonians. Betty Schmall founded Hospice of Dayton, one of the nation's first and now one of its largest and best hospices. Her passion, determination, conviction, persuasion, public relations, fundraising, and organizational skills changed the quality of patient care in Dayton and revolutionized its delivery across the country and around the world.
My mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer of the ovary. She was only 55 years old. That was way too soon. She was too young. And it was a terrible experience because I knew the healthcare system inside out. But there were lots of problems that came up, comments that were made, things that people thought were okay, but they hurt.
So what Betty initiated, what she wanted to do is make sure there wasn't suffering at the end of life. She wanted that support to be there for people who were experiencing pain and suffering and symptoms that were very hard to manage.
She took a concept of reading about hospice and had that foresight, that wisdom to go out, and the strength and energy it must have taken to say, we can do this, to go out and knock on doors, to go to hospital administrators, to lobby, to reach out, to obtain land, and to do fundraising. And what a burden that was to her to go out and do all that work, to reach out. I think that took a lot for her to do that.
The way we treat dying people in this country, up until hospice came along, it was just, people really didn't, the nurses didn't have the skills, the doctors didn't have the skills. They avoided people who were dying, get away from them. And the compassion was lacking. Not that anybody was mean, it was just a lack of knowledge and a fear. There was a lot of fear among a lot of healthcare professionals because we're supposed to save lives, and when somebody's dying, it looks like, you know, well, that's a failure.
But we were so joyful about doing this good work, and people would always, friends, each of our staff friends would say, our family members, you can't hold up under this is very depressing work. And nobody understood what joyful work it was. That if we each accepted that death is part of life, and if you do that, then your next step is to say, we can make it better. We can be part of making this whole process the best it can be.
So I really decided I was going to give people what I missed, and that's what I did. So I started hospice with that premise. In the first month, I went everywhere, no matter how big or how small the group, to talk about hospice. In big groups, I talked about where people wanted to die. And they wanted to die at home, with their family around them, in the comfort of their own beds, that kind of thing. And in small groups, I did the same. And, you know, that's what hooked people in, because they remembered their loved one dying, often in a hospital, with people ignoring them because there wasn't anything you could do for them. And I remember one time a doctor told me that it was ridiculous to think it took a nurse to provide care to a dying patient, because I ought to be working where I could use my skills to save people. And I told him that I thought he was wrong, that I was saving a different part of them in a different way. But you know, that kind of attitude was everywhere in the medical field when we started hospice.
Once I became convinced that we needed to have hospice care in this community, I went around to each CEO of the hospital and talked to them about the hospice concept and what kind of help we would need. We started with money from the hospitals to provide a nurse. We then decided it was time to hire somebody to develop the organization, and that's how we got to Betty.
I think it took the fortitude of a couple of people that wanted to start it, like Betty Schmal, like Carol Dixon, like Jim Ungerleider, to really say this is something we need and we're going to be the best at it.
Hospice of Dayton currently serves over 4,000 patients annually and employs over 650 staff members. But the first few years were so lean, the founders weren't sure how their fledgling organization would survive. The vision of those founders of a different kind of end-of-life care quickly found support among all the local hospitals and community leaders.
There was a week when we didn't know if we were going to be paid. I mean, we held our paychecks because, Betty and I, because it was always day to day. Are we going to make it? I think we always believed that we would, that this was too good a thing not to survive.
At that point, we had about 5 patients. We had 1 nurse, 3 volunteers, and as I remember, about $3,000 in the bank.
We were so small, we didn't have different people for backup and that kind of thing. So we did our own. And it worked.
Betty picking the right people to start on the board, and our board grew, and by word of mouth, they just wanted people that were going to support this, not people just to sit on a board and say, oh, I'm on the board of Hospice of Dayton. These were doers.
I quickly volunteered and went to a meeting at the Pretzinger House over next to Miami Valley Hospital. That was the first meeting place, the first office, and where hospice was really born in that facility. And I went to that meeting and never left.
Our next site was at Emory Park, and I remember those were like real offices. People had offices, there were serious discussions, they were putting policies and procedures into place, and it seemed to have more structure, just something other than just a concept to me.
It was a little office right next to the East Town Kroger in Dayton, and just, you know, very simple kind of setting, very informal setting, but also a huge amount of camaraderie.
Back then, we actually had a payroll clerk. We had a closet filled with dressings and supplies that were donated. And you just went in every day and you picked your walker out and wheelchair, you got in your car, and you actually went out and saw patients.
As Hospice of Dayton services expanded, supporters began to spearhead a movement for a facility designed to meet the special needs of hospice patients. So the grounds on Wilmington Avenue that were owned by the state of Ohio were identified as an ideal location. Due to the generosity of over 14,000 donors, large and small, dreams of a facility designed especially for hospice patients became a reality.
St. Elizabeth Hospital, which is a hospital that closed years ago, they kind of donated inpatient hospice beds to the organization. So now we not only had nurses, but we had a small inpatient facility.
As we grew and we took on more complex patients, we identified that some patients really needed more inpatient care. And so Betty went on a campaign to say, you know, I think we need to build our own building.
Before that actually happened, though, she was looking for land to put it on, and the city came up with, they owned this piece of land, and supposedly they offered an extraordinary price for it that we could afford. And I remember we took a little tour before anything was built to see what this place was like. Of course, it was all wooded, but it had 2 nice ponds. It was off to the one side of downtown.
And it felt like home. It felt like the place to be. So then we had to go through everything. We had to get it from the state and, you know, get the sign off from the mental health department, get permission from the neighbors, all kinds of things. And we did it. And then we got plans and started building, and here it is.
I think that took a lot of courage, and to go out and to get that land, and then also to do fundraising and to have that building paid for by the time we moved in.
We got really excited. I believe it was from there we started building, and we had the groundbreaking and so forth. It was very, very exciting to have our own space that was not just trying to accommodate for our needs, but rather to start with a dream of what it should be.
This was designed and built by patients for patients. There wasn't one like it.
It steamrolled even more because we were kind of surprised in Dayton. We became one of the biggest hospices in the nation.
It is something for Dayton to be proud of. And I don't know if that would happen today, but it certainly did at the time we did it.
We rapidly grew out of the first building.
I bet we hadn't moved in there in 6 months, and we had to grow again. So Betty went on another campaign and had to build a second building.
I was serving as board chair at the time, and Mr. Shaw had come into the building and asked to see Betty. And Betty said, well, could I ask what maybe you're thinking about doing? And with that he said, well, $1 million.
Some people were very forthcoming like that.
I don't know if it was the same day or within a couple of days, Mr. Shaw either came back or called Betty and said, I talked to Mrs. Shaw, we've talked this over, and we've decided to make a $2 million donation.
It surprised me that they had that much, but it didn't surprise me that they gave to hospice, because it was worth giving to.
What would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail? In 1978, Betty Schmall and the handful of professionals and volunteers who worked with her knew they had to attempt to create a better way to care for the terminally ill, and that failure was not an option. And in so doing, they began a story that continues to this day, with new chapters being added each year to the mission of Hospice of Dayton. That is, providing superior care and services to honor the lives of patients and families that Hospice of Dayton has the privilege of caring for. The Hospice of Dayton story is one of passion and compassion, courage and conviction, persuasion and persistence, dedication and determination. And it's one that a Daytonian like myself can point to and be proud of, that it happened right here.
Not to brag, I've been a 10-top woman. I've got an honorary doctorate from UD. I've got the Walk of Fame. I've got all kinds of accolades. Now, other people should see hospice as deserving the same accolades. They should be hanging up something on your door saying, wonderful.
It wouldn't be here without the support of the community, not just financial, but the fact that people still speak well of Hospice of Dayton. That's what keeps it going. You know, all the money in the world won't make a bit of difference if people don't get the care they need and don't say to their neighbor, this was a really good experience.
There may be copycats that come along, but there's something I think about Hospice of Dayton that's wedded into the community. I think they really tried hard to help the community feel part of us, and we were part of the community. And so for a very long time, if the word hospice was used, it meant Hospice of Dayton.
I still say the term we, and it's true because I feel that this belongs to everybody in this area. I don't feel it's just an organization for the people here. This is a community organization. It is our organization. And I support it, and I'm proud of it, and it's always going to be we.
We are where we are today because of those that came before us, that worked so diligently, that took some extraordinary risk and worked very hard to get us to where we are. That we need to be honorable to that each day we need to earn the respect, the trust, and the generosity of this community, that we are now the keepers of the reputation.
I think when you hear the history of Hospice of Dayton, the passion that was put into developing this organization, you can't help but feel pride, even whether if you work there 1 day or 10 days, it doesn't matter. You know you're part of something that's really, really important.
And it is about service. It's about having a servant's heart in doing this work. It's about making sure that we not only provide the very best care, but that people feel good about receiving that care. That the mission's still here, and it's still as important today as it was 35 years ago when Betty started. Now we're building on and innovating in new ways, and ways that we take the legacy of those that have come before us in this mission and build on that. So we want to make sure we honor them. We want to make sure the mission is stronger for it. All the ones who came before, they took those risks, and they deserve the credit.